My ex-wife demanded alimony because I'm wealthy. Court saw her hidden assets. She pays me now. Well, my ex-wife Vanessa stood up in divorce court and said, "Your Honor, Arthur has been hiding his wealth from me for years. I deserve substantial alimony because he's much richer than he pretends to be." I simply adjusted my reading glasses and quietly opened my briefcase. By the end of that hearing, the judge had ordered her to pay me alimony. And that was just the beginning. For 12 years, I thought Vanessa was the struggling artist I'd married. I'm Arthur Donovan, 52 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm. Nothing flashy, nothing exciting. Vanessa always called my job boring number crunching. What she didn't know was that those numbers had taught me exactly how to find money that people try to hide. The moment I heard her lawyer claim I was secretly wealthy while she played the role of the poor, abandoned wife, I realized my ex-wife had been lying about a lot more than just her feelings. They thought they were dealing with some pushover accountant who'd roll over and pay whatever they demanded. They were about to learn that I specialize in finding financial fraud, and I'm very, very good at my job. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I met Vanessa 12 years ago at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. She was this vibrant, creative woman who painted watercolor landscapes and talked about opening her own art studio someday. I was immediately drawn to her passion and energy. I've always been the quiet type. Even as a kid, I preferred books to sports, numbers to crowds. My job as a forensic accountant suited me perfectly. I got to solve puzzles all day, finding discrepancies in financial records and helping lawyers build cases against people who thought they were smarter than the system. Vanessa seemed to love that I was different from the typical guy she'd dated. "You're so stable, Arthur," she'd say. "So dependable. I feel safe with you." Our early years were good. I supported her art, even though it barely brought in any income. I paid for canvases, paints, studio space, art show entry fees. When she wanted to take expensive workshops with famous artists, I covered the costs without complaint. I never made a big deal about money. I lived modestly, drove a practical car, and didn't spend much on myself. My salary was decent, and I'd inherited some money from my parents, but I kept our lifestyle simple. I figured we were building something together. Looking back, I can see when things started to change. About 3 years ago, Vanessa started getting frustrated with our small life. She complained that other wives she knew had bigger houses, fancier cars, more expensive vacations. "My friend Heather's husband just bought her a brand new BMW," she'd say. "And Diane's husband took her to Europe for their anniversary. When was the last time you surprised me with anything special?" I tried to do more. I planned nice dinners, bought her jewelry, even surprised her with a weekend trip to San Francisco. But nothing seemed to be enough. The real change came when she started spending time with a new group of friends, other artists and creative types who seemed to have a lot more money than their art could possibly provide. She began going out more often, coming home later, and treating me like I was somehow holding her back. "You just don't understand ambition, Arthur," she'd say when I'd ask about her late nights. "You're content to stay in your little box forever." 6 months ago, she started talking about needing space to find herself. She moved out to a loft apartment downtown, supposedly to focus on her art. I offered to help with the rent, but she insisted she could handle it herself. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. Vanessa's art had never made enough money to cover her coffee habit, let alone rent on a downtown loft. But I trusted her. After 12 years of marriage, I believed we were just going through a rough patch. 3 months later, she filed for divorce. The papers were served to me at work on a Tuesday morning. As I read through them, one thing jumped out immediately. She was claiming that I had substantial hidden assets and was requesting alimony based on my significantly higher earning capacity. That night, I called her to try to understand what was happening. "Vanessa, what's this about hidden assets? You know exactly what I make and what we have. Doi, Arthur, you handle all the finances. You could have accounts I don't know about. But I don't. You can look at everything. You always could. It's too late for that," she said coldly. "My lawyer says you've been controlling our finances to keep me dependent. I deserve compensation for all the years I sacrificed my career for our marriage. What career? I supported your art for 12 years. Exactly. You kept me from pursuing real opportunities because you wanted me to stay small. Well, I'm done staying small. When she hung up on me, I sat in our empty house and tried to process what had just happened. My wife of 12 years was claiming I'd been financially abusing her, when the truth was the exact opposite. But that conversation also made me realize something important. Vanessa was lying about our finances, and if she was lying about that, what else was she lying about? That's when I decided to do what I do best, follow the money. The next morning, I started doing some basic research on Vanessa's new life. As a forensic accountant, I have access to certain databases and investigative tools that most people don't know about. What I found in just 1 hour of searching shocked me. The downtown loft she'd been renting for 6 months? The lease was in the name of Blake Carmichael, a 38-year-old art collector and gallery owner. Vanessa wasn't paying rent. She was living with this guy. But that was just the beginning. I dug deeper into Blake Carmichael's background. He owned 3 art galleries in Portland and Seattle, plus a consulting business that helped wealthy people buy and sell expensive art. His businesses were doing very well, much better than Vanessa had ever let on. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. Vanessa had been listed as a partner in Blake's consulting business for the past 8 months. Not just romantically, legally. She was pulling in substantial income as his business partner, income she'd never mentioned to me. I pulled their business filings and found records of payments to V. Donovan, my wife, totaling more than $60,000 over the past 6 months. She'd been earning serious money while claiming to need space and asking me to help with expenses. But the real shock came when I found property records. 3 weeks before she filed for divorce, Vanessa had purchased a condo in Seattle. Not rented, purchased. The down payment was $45,000, paid in cash. I sat staring at my computer screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My wife, who'd been claiming poverty and asking for financial help, had somehow come up with $45,000 in cash to buy property in another state. That's when I realized this wasn't just a divorce. It was a planned financial attack. I printed out everything I'd found and put it in a secure file. Then I called the best divorce attorney in Portland, Joel Whitfield. Joel had a reputation for handling complex financial cases, and I had a feeling this was about to get very complex. Arthur, Joel said after reviewing my preliminary findings, your wife isn't just leaving you. She's trying to rob you. What do you mean? She's been building assets with her boyfriend while still married to you, then claiming poverty to get alimony from you. It's a classic financial manipulation scheme. Can she do that? Joel smiled grimly. She can try, but she picked the wrong husband to try it on. You're going to help me destroy this case, and then we're going to turn the tables on her. That night, I realized that my 12-year marriage had been a lie for at least the past year. But I also realized that Vanessa had made a huge mistake. She tried to financially manipulate a forensic accountant. Over the next 2 weeks, I did what I do best. I followed every financial trail Vanessa had left behind. Joel had given me a list of things to look for. Hidden income, undisclosed assets, evidence of financial planning for the divorce, and proof that she'd been building wealth while claiming poverty. I found all of it and more. First, I traced her income from Blake's businesses. She'd been paid as a consultant for his art acquisition business, supposedly helping wealthy clients choose pieces for their collections. But when I looked at the payment schedule, something interesting emerged. The payments had dramatically increased right around the time she started talking about needing space. In the 3 months before she moved out, her monthly income from Blake had jumped from $5,000 to nearly $15,000. She'd been building up cash while planning her exit. Next, I looked at her spending patterns. The credit cards she thought I didn't monitor showed some very interesting purchases. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, luxury hotel stays. All charged during times when she told me she was at art workshops or working late. But the smoking gun came when I traced the source of her condo down payment. The $45,000 hadn't come from Blake's business directly. It had come from the sale of artwork that I recognized from our own house. Over the past year, Vanessa had been quietly selling pieces from our personal art collection. Paintings we'd bought together, sculptures I'd given her as gifts, even some pieces she'd inherited from her grandmother. She'd been liquidating our shared assets to fund her new life, while telling me she was reorganizing our art collection. I documented every sale, every missing piece, every dollar that should have been considered marital property but had instead gone into her secret accounts. Then I made my first strategic move. I hired a private investigator to document Vanessa and Blake's lifestyle. I needed proof of how they were actually living, not how they were claiming to live in court documents. The PI, a former detective named Carol Hayes, was thorough and discreet. Within a week, she had photos of Vanessa and Blake at expensive restaurants, driving luxury cars, and attending high-end art events. More importantly, she had evidence of their business relationship and proof that Vanessa was actively involved in running Blake's galleries. But Carol's best discovery was a recording. She followed them to a restaurant where they were meeting with Blake's lawyer, and their conversation was loud enough to pick up with a directional microphone. "The key is making Arthur look like he's been hiding money," Blake was saying. "If we can convince the judge he's wealthier than he appears, Vanessa can get substantial alimony." "But what if he fights it?" Vanessa asked. "He won't," Blake replied. "Arthur's a pushover. He'll probably just agree to whatever we ask for rather than go through a nasty court battle." Vanessa laughed. "You're right. He hates conflict. He'll pay whatever it takes to make this go away quickly." The lawyer chimed in. "And once we establish that pattern of support, we can keep the alimony going for years. Arthur will be funding Vanessa's new life indefinitely." As I listened to that recording, something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't just about divorce. It was about setting me up to be financially exploited for years to come. They had seriously underestimated who they were dealing with. Joel and I spent 3 hours going through all the evidence I gathered. By the end of our meeting, we both knew we had enough to completely destroy Vanessa's case and turn the tables on her. "Arthur, this is better than I hoped for," Joel said. "She's not just lying about her assets. She's committed fraud by hiding marital property and planning to perjure herself in court. What's our strategy? We're going to let her dig her own grave. Let her file her financial affidavit claiming poverty. Let her testify under oath about her lack of income and assets. Then we're going to present evidence that proves every word was a lie." But Joel had an even better idea. In this state, when one spouse has been deliberately hiding assets and lying about their financial situation, the court can award the innocent spouse additional compensation. Not just a fair split of assets, actual punitive damages. Meaning Vanessa could end up owing you alimony. I stared at him. She could end up paying me? More than that. If we can prove she's been systematically defrauding you, she could be ordered to pay back everything she's hidden, plus attorney fees, plus ongoing support to compensate you for her financial abuse. That's when Joel explained the full scope of our strategy. We would let Vanessa present her case first. Let her claim poverty. Let her demand alimony. Let her paint me as a controlling husband who'd hidden assets from her. We'd even let her bring Blake to court as a character witness to testify about how badly I'd supposedly treated her. Then, when it was our turn, we'd systematically destroy every lie she'd told. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting their fraud for weeks, and I had evidence that would prove Vanessa had been planning this financial scam since before she even moved out. Asterisk, asterisk. Joel pulled out a legal pad and started sketching our approach. First, we'll present evidence of her hidden income. The $60,000 she's made working with Blake while claiming to be unemployed. Second, we'll show proof of her secret asset purchases. The condo, the expensive lifestyle, the sold artwork. Third, we'll play the recording of them planning to defraud you. And finally, we'll demand that she be held accountable for financial abuse and perjury. I looked at the mountain of evidence we'd assembled. Bank records, business filings, property deeds, photographs, recordings, witness statements. It was more comprehensive than most fraud cases I'd worked on professionally. "Joel, what are the chances this works?" He smiled. "Arthur, in 20 years of practicing family law, I've never seen a case where one spouse has so thoroughly documented their own fraud. Vanessa hasn't just lied to you. She's about to lie to a judge under oath, and we can prove every lie. What happens to Blake? That's the beautiful part. Blake's businesses are about to get very interested attention from the IRS. When we present evidence that he's been paying your wife under-the-table income while she was still married to you, they're going to want to audit his books. Art dealers who play fast and loose with taxes usually have a lot to hide. Over the next 2 weeks, I refined our evidence and prepared for court. I felt like I was preparing for the biggest case of my career. Except this time, it was personal. Joel warned me that Vanessa would probably try to settle once she realized what we had on her. Don't take any settlement offer, he said. I want this to go to court. I want her to lie under oath, and I want the judge to see exactly what kind of person she is. 2 days before a court date, Vanessa called me. Arthur, maybe we should try to work this out without going to court, she said. Divorce is so messy and expensive. What did you have in mind? I'm willing to accept less alimony if you don't fight the divorce. How much less? Maybe just $3,000 a month instead of $5,000. I almost laughed. She had no idea what was coming. I think we should let the judge decide what's fair, I said. Are you sure? Courts can be unpredictable. I'm sure. After I hung up, I realized that Vanessa was starting to panic. Maybe her lawyer had warned her that her case wasn't as strong as she'd thought. She was right to be worried. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in Judge Catherine Morrison's courtroom. Judge Morrison had a reputation for being thorough, fair, and absolutely intolerant of anyone who lied in her court. Vanessa arrived with her attorney, Daniel Pierce, and Blake. Seeing Blake there surprised me. He was planning to testify on her behalf, which meant he'd be under oath too. Joel and I had our evidence organized in banker's boxes. We looked prepared, but we deliberately kept our presentation low-key. We wanted Vanessa to think we were just going through the motions. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order and asked Pierce to present Vanessa's case. For the next hour, I listened to my ex-wife lie under oath about every aspect of our marriage and her current financial situation. She testified that I had always been secretive about money and that she suspected I had hidden accounts. She claimed that she was currently unemployed and had no significant assets or income. She said she was struggling to make ends meet and needed substantial alimony to maintain the lifestyle we'd built together. Pierce presented financial documents showing Vanessa's supposed poverty, bank statements with low balances, unemployment records, evidence of her desperate financial situation. Then Blake took the stand as a character witness. He testified that Vanessa was a talented but struggling artist who had been emotionally and financially controlled by me. He claimed that I had deliberately kept her from succeeding professionally and that she deserved compensation for years of lost opportunities. What he didn't say was that he'd been paying her $15,000 a month for the past 6 months, or that they'd been planning this fraud together. When Pierce finished, Judge Morrison asked if I had any questions for their witnesses. Joel stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Just a few. Joel's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Donovan, you testified that you're currently unemployed. Is that correct? Yes. Have you received any income at all in the past 6 months? Just some small payments for artwork sales. How much income from art sales? Maybe a few $100s total. Mrs. Donovan, are you familiar with a business called Carmichael Art Consulting? I saw Vanessa's face go pale. Somewhat. Have you ever worked for that business? I've done some very minor consulting. What kind of consulting? Just helping clients choose pieces occasionally. How much were you paid for this consulting? Vanessa looked at her lawyer, then back at Joel. It was very irregular. Maybe a few $100s here and there. Joel nodded and made a note. Then he turned to Blake. Mr. Carmichael, you own Carmichael Art Consulting, correct? Yes. Has Mrs. Donovan ever worked for your business? She's helped out occasionally. How much have you paid her for this help? Blake shifted uncomfortably. It's been very minimal. She's more of a friend helping out than a real employee. Would it surprise you to learn that your business has issued payments to V. Donovan totaling over $60,000 in the past 6 months? The courtroom went dead silent. Blake, I need to review my books to give an exact figure. Joel smiled. That won't be necessary. We have copies of those records right here. That's when I knew we had them. Joel spent the next 2 hours systematically destroying every lie Vanessa and Blake had told. He presented bank records showing Vanessa's hidden income, property deeds for her secret condo purchase, and evidence of her expensive lifestyle. He showed photos of her and Blake at luxury restaurants and high-end art events. He played recordings of them planning to defraud me. But the moment that sealed their fate was when Joel presented evidence of the artwork sales. Your Honor, Mrs. Donovan testified that she's received only a few $100s from art sales. However, we have documentation showing that she's sold over $40,000 worth of art in the past year. Art that was marital property. Joel projected images on the courtroom screen showing pieces that had hung in our house, alongside sales records proving Vanessa had sold them without my knowledge. Mrs. Donovan converted marital assets to cash, used that cash to purchase property in another state, and then lied about her financial situation to claim poverty in these proceedings. Judge Morrison was taking detailed notes. Mrs. Donovan, did you sell artwork that belonged to both you and your husband? Vanessa looked trapped. Some of the pieces were gifts to me. Did you tell your husband you were selling them? He knew I was reorganizing our collection. That's not what I asked. Did you tell him you were selling pieces from your collection? A long pause. Not specifically. And did you tell him you used the money from those sales to buy property? Another pause. No. Judge Morrison's expression was getting colder by the minute. But Joel wasn't done. He presented evidence that Vanessa had been planning this financial strategy for months, including emails between her and Blake discussing how to maximize her divorce settlement. Then he played the restaurant recording. The entire courtroom heard Blake and Vanessa discussing their plan to make me look like I was hiding money, their confidence that I'd roll over and pay whatever they demanded, and their strategy to keep collecting alimony for years. When the recording finished, Judge Morrison looked directly at Vanessa. Mrs. Donovan, is that your voice on the recording? Yes, but... And Mr. Carmichael, is that your voice? Blake nodded miserably. So you both conspired to present false information to this court in order to increase Mrs. Donovan's financial award? Pierce tried to object, but Judge Morrison cut him off. I've heard enough. We'll take a 30-minute recess, and then I'll render my decision. During the break, I could see Vanessa and Blake arguing in the hallway. Pierce looked like he wanted to disappear. Joel was confident but cautious. I think we got them, he said. But judges can be unpredictable. When we reconvened, Judge Morrison was clearly angry. In 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated attempt to defraud the court system. Mrs. Donovan, you have lied under oath about your income, your assets, and your intentions. Mr. Carmichael, you have participated in this deception. She turned to address Vanessa directly. Mrs. Donovan, you claim to need alimony because you're financially disadvantaged. However, the evidence shows that you have been systematically hiding income and assets while planning to defraud your husband. This court finds that you're not entitled to alimony. Furthermore, you will be required to pay restitution to Mr. Donovan for the marital assets you converted without his knowledge. But she wasn't finished. Additionally, given Mr. Donovan's legitimate financial needs and your demonstrated ability to earn substantial income, you will pay Mr. Donovan's spousal support in the amount of $2,000 per month for 2 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Vanessa was going to pay me alimony. Finally, Judge Morrison continued, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for possible perjury charges and to the IRS for investigation of potential tax fraud. Vanessa started crying. Blake looked sick. Pierce was frantically taking notes. As we left the courthouse, Joel was beaming. Arthur, that was the most satisfying case I've ever won. But the consequences for Vanessa and Blake were just beginning. Within a week of the hearing, the full scope of Vanessa and Blake's problems became clear. The district attorney's office decided to pursue perjury charges against Vanessa. Lying under oath in a family court proceeding is a felony, and Judge Morrison's referral carried significant weight. The IRS began an audit of both Blake's businesses and Vanessa's unreported income. Art dealers who deal in cash transactions are already on the IRS watch list, and evidence of under-the-table payments to Vanessa triggered a comprehensive investigation. But the real devastating blow came when the state's art licensing board began investigating Blake's galleries. See, when you run art authentication and consulting services, you're required to disclose certain business relationships and financial arrangements. Blake had never disclosed that Vanessa was his business partner, which violated several licensing requirements. More importantly, some of the art that Vanessa had consulted on, including pieces she'd helped clients acquire, turned out to be forgeries or misrepresented works. When the licensing board started digging, they found a pattern of questionable transactions and inflated valuations. Joel kept me updated on the cascading consequences. Blake's lost his gallery license pending the investigation, he told me. Without that license, he can't operate his consulting business or authenticate artwork. His income has basically dropped to zero. What about Vanessa? She's facing potential jail time for the perjury charges. Her lawyer's trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office is pretty angry about the deliberate fraud. But there was more. The IRS audit revealed that Blake owed substantial back taxes on his unreported cash transactions. The penalties and interest pushed his total tax debt to over $90,000. Meanwhile, Vanessa was discovering that her Seattle condo purchase had been a mistake. The building had serious structural problems that hadn't been disclosed, and she was facing expensive repair assessments on top of her mortgage payments. 3 months after the hearing, Vanessa called me. "Arthur, I'm in serious trouble," she said. "I can't pay the alimony order. Blake's businesses are falling apart, and I'm facing criminal charges. That's unfortunate. Is there any way we could modify the court order? Maybe I could pay you back over time instead of monthly payments." "You'll need to talk to your lawyer about that. I can't afford my lawyer anymore." I felt a moment of satisfaction, but also something that might have been pity. "Vanessa, you made your choices. You planned this whole thing. You lied under oath, and you tried to steal from me. These are the consequences. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant to defraud me out of thousands of dollars. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught." 6 months later, Vanessa pleaded guilty to perjury charges and was sentenced to probation and community service. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for the converted marital assets, plus court costs and my attorney fees. Blake's businesses never recovered. He eventually filed for bankruptcy and moved back in with his parents. The last I heard, he was working as a sales associate at a furniture store. As for the alimony payments, Vanessa managed to make them for about 8 months before defaulting. The court held her in contempt and garnished her wages from the part-time retail job she'd eventually found. But by then, I moved on to bigger and better things. The final confrontation with Vanessa happened about a year after the divorce was finalized. I was having lunch at a cafe downtown when she approached my table. She looked very different from the confident, entitled woman who'd walked into court demanding alimony. Her hair was shorter and darker, her clothes were ordinary, and she had the look of someone who'd learned that actions have consequences. "Arthur, can I sit down for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "You look good," she said. "Happy. I am happy. I heard you got promoted again." My firm had made me a partner 6 months earlier, recognizing my work on several high-profile fraud cases. Ironically, the skills I'd used to expose Vanessa's deception had impressed my colleagues. "Life's been good," I said simply. "Arthur, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I was stupid and greedy, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it." I studied her face. She seemed sincere, but after everything that had happened, sincerity from Vanessa didn't mean much to me. "I'm glad you've learned from the experience." "I have. Losing everything taught me what really matters." "And what's that?" "Honesty. Integrity. Not taking good people for granted." We sat in silence for a moment. "Arthur, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance you could help me get the restitution payments reduced? I'm barely making ends meet, and the monthly payments are making it impossible for me to get back on my feet." There it was. Even now, even after everything, Vanessa was asking me to bail her out of the consequences of her own actions. "Vanessa, do you remember what you said about me in court? That I was controlling and secretive? That I'd kept you from succeeding?" She looked down. I was lying. I know that now. You weren't just lying in court. You were lying to yourself for years. You convinced yourself that I was the problem, that I was holding you back, when the truth was that I supported everything you ever wanted to do. You did. You were a good husband, and I threw it away. You didn't just throw it away. You tried to destroy me financially while you build a new life with someone else. You planned it for months. I know. So no, Vanessa, I won't help you reduce the restitution payments. Those payments represent the money you stole from our marriage. You owe me that money, and you'll pay it back according to the court order. She started to tear up. Arthur, I'm struggling. I can barely afford my rent. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to commit fraud. I stood up to leave. Arthur, wait. What if I told you something that might change your mind? What? Blake and I aren't together anymore. He blamed me for ruining his business, and I realized he was just using me to get back at his ex-wife. I was just a tool in his revenge against Patricia. I looked at her with what I hoped was the right mixture of sympathy and indifference. I'm sorry that happened to you, Vanessa, but it doesn't change what you did to me. You're really not going to help me. You made your choices. These are the consequences. The same way I had to live with the consequences of trusting someone who was planning to betray me. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. I hope someday you can forgive me. I didn't turn around, but I did think about her words. The truth was, I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger would have poisoned my new life. But forgiveness doesn't mean removing consequences. Vanessa had learned a hard lesson about the cost of betrayal, and that lesson was important for both of us. That was 2 years ago. Today, my life looks completely different, and all of it is better. I'm still a forensic accountant, but now I'm a partner in one of the most respected firms in the Pacific Northwest. My reputation for uncovering financial fraud has made me highly sought after, and my income has nearly doubled since the divorce. I've also started teaching part-time at the local university, sharing my expertise with the next generation of accountants. There's something satisfying about helping young people understand how numbers tell stories and how those stories can protect people from being taken advantage of. 6 months ago, I started dating someone new. Her name is Claire, and she's a high school math teacher. She's smart, funny, honest, and completely unimpressed by financial games or material status. When I told her about my experience with Vanessa, she said, "Well, at least you know what red flags to watch for now." Claire drives a 10-year-old Subaru, lives in a modest apartment, and thinks my biggest flaw is that I'm too generous with money. She's never once asked me about my income or assets, and she insists on paying for her own meals when we go out. As for Vanessa, she eventually moved back to her hometown to live with her sister. The criminal charges resulted in probation and community service, but the financial consequences have been long-lasting. She's still making restitution payments, though she's asked for several modifications over the years. Blake never recovered from the business failures and tax problems. Last I heard, he was working in retail and living in a studio apartment. His relationship with Vanessa lasted about 6 months after the divorce hearing, just long enough for them to blame each other for their mutual downfall. I don't follow their lives closely, but occasionally mutual acquaintances share updates. I've learned that Vanessa works as a bookkeeper now, which is ironic, considering she spent 12 years claiming to be confused by financial matters. The most important thing I've learned from this experience is that quiet strength is often underestimated, but it's also incredibly powerful. Vanessa and Blake thought they could manipulate me because I wasn't flashy or aggressive. They mistook my courtesy for weakness and my trust for stupidity. They learned too late that there's a big difference between being kind and being foolish. I still live simply and avoid showing off my financial success. But now I do it by choice, not because I'm afraid of conflict. I've learned that the right people will appreciate your character regardless of your bank account, and the wrong people will try to exploit you no matter how much or how little you have. These days, when I help clients uncover financial fraud, I often think about my own experience. Every case reminds me that people who think they're smarter than the system usually end up proving they're not. And every successful case reminds me that justice, when it's served properly, is incredibly satisfying. The woman who once called me boring and unambitious learned that boring people sometimes have the most interesting skills. And the man who thought he could help her steal from me learned that art dealers who cheat on taxes usually have a lot more to hide than they realize. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just being prepared when people underestimate you and letting their own greed destroy them. I'm 54 now, professionally successful, personally content, and in a relationship with someone who sees my real worth. Vanessa is 48, financially struggling, and learning that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I don't wish her harm, but I also don't regret the consequences she's facing. She made calculated decisions to betray and defraud me, and she's learning that those decisions carry a price. And that, I think, is exactly how justice should work. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you would have done in Arthur's situation. Have you ever had someone to try to take advantage of your kindness? Share your story below.
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.